Now let's start with the pinky colour, and I'm just going to trim this down, because the reason I trim it down as much as possible, if I try and run a big sheet through my die cutting machine and I'm only wanting to cut a little bit, this piece going through the machine might start getting little marks and dinks in it from paper that's caught in my plates, or it might scuff the edges. So I do cut my papers down as small as I can get away with. Now I need this a little bit larger because I need to tape it. The tape, I believe, is still in stock on CraftStash. You went crazy for it. We did get a lot in. We needed to, obviously. It's the low tack tape that holds your dies down and helps you with masking, things like that. You get the holder and 3 rolls for $4.99. How good's that? So popping this into my die cutting machine. So all I'm going to do first of all is cut, just without the rubber mat. Let's bring this in a little bit so you can see it. I was trying to clear myself space. I was actually crafting right up until the final minute today. So I've got, you wouldn't believe the mess that is surrounding. I mean, this is bad enough for me, isn't it? Everybody who knows me knows I usually craft tidy. This is super messy. But around it is even worse. Okay, so let's have a look at this owl when we cut it. So can you see there? Let's hold it. Can you see we have got some fabulous ruffles around the chest that have all been cut into, so you can lift those up. The eyes have cut out, and there's the little feet as well, which you can roll out. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but because I know the lights glare. Now I'm going to keep that on there, and I'm going to put into my die cutting machine a thin rubber mat. Most cutting machines will come with one. If you don't have one, you can use something like a piece of, you know, your fun foam. And what you want to do is make sure that the rubber mat is going onto the paper, not onto the die. So put it onto the paper, because what's going to happen is the die is going to press into the rubber mat, and the rubber mat is going to squish the paper up into the die and into these gaps on here, giving you that embossed look. For those of you who are new to paper crafting and die cutting, you may not have actually worked out, why do we do this? Why do we use a rubber mat with some dies? It doesn't work with all dies, but it does with some. And this one is actually made to work in that way. So you always get this very sticky. So peel that off, put that to the side. I've just put it on my trimmer, which I know I'm going to need in a little while. Okay, now I'm just going to peel back the tape gently, just to release Mr. Owl. Is it Mr. or Mrs.? I think she's a Mrs. today. Okay, now I'm really hoping you can see the additional detail in there. Can you see that? It's gorgeous, isn't it? So it's got this camera. If I bring it too close, it actually goes blurry. So I need to bring it a little bit lower down to be in focus. You've got so much detail. It's beautiful, embossed like that. You can see you've got the eyes out. So you've still got the areas that will lift up all this feathering around here. If I turn it around, hopefully that's no easier to see. You can see all the feathering. You can lift up, you can start rolling with your pokey tool, the same with the feet. Now I'm going to pop this back into the die though. Pop you in there we go. Now where did I put, I'm going to have to bring this over because I'm not sure quite where I put my clear blending mat. It's usually here. I've usually got it right here, and it's not today. I told you it was a mess. Never like this, never. Let's come with brushed corduroy, yeah, brushed corduroy. And let's pick out the detail. Now you can ink onto dies. I know many dies do this now. You can do that. Just make sure you wipe your die afterwards. Now, can you see mine looks patchy? I was testing out using texture pastes with it. It kind of works, but you don't want to use too much texture paste, because if you use too much, it does get underneath. And it's a good idea, if you're going to ink like this, do that embossing first. Even if you aren't worried about the embossed look, do the embossing anyway, because what that does is that pushes the paper up into the spaces, and that prevents any sort of bleed through of the ink. Okay, it just makes it a bit of a tighter seal. I'm using a brush rather than a foam blender, because all the bristles are going to get into all the little nooks and crannies, left, right, up, down. Make sure everything is inked and covered, and no small areas, because there are some really small details on this die. Make sure nothing's missing. There we go. Inky fingers, an inky brush, but that's fine. Pop that away. So let's just pop this out as well. So now you can really see that detail in there. Isn't that lovely? So I can take now my pokey tool and I can just roll these small areas, just the feathers. I mean, you can go with as many of the feathers as you want. I'm not going to do too many. I don't want it to be too dimensional, that's the word. And the ear feathers as well. So with regards to your die, if you do ink it, like I say, do give it a wipe, do give it a clean. Okay, I'm just going to use a wet wipe for this. You can run it under the tap, but just, it is essential that you dry it properly. Please do dry it properly, because if you don't, you could, of course, end up, although it's coated, you could end up with ruining the metal if it's left damp for any amount of time, because it is metal. Okay, so if you use a wet wipe, they actually dry quicker than just water, don't they? It kind of evaporates. Right, so now I've got 2 of these. I've got one here that I did earlier as well, and I am going to be placing those back to back for this card. Okay, so it's going to be a spinny owl. Let's prepare the rest of the card using the outline die. There we go, so pop that, like I say, taking a look, making sure that border is straight. If you use a trimmer, it's always going to be right angles anyway. Make sure it's a nice even border all the way round. Then I'm going to take this part, so this is the outline die, and I'm going to open my card up and tape this down. Where's my low tack tape? Just tape this down so that it's central. Again, if you prefer to measure to make sure it's right in the middle, you can do that. Look how handy this tape dispenser is. Actually, I'm going to tape, I should have done it with this one. Let's quickly lift it off before it goes through the pressure of the machine. Put your tape on the bit that's going to be the waist, which in this case will be the centre. Now, is this going to fit in sideways? It will just fit, but in case you do a card that's too wide, it's a good idea. You can fold it over. So folding the back of the card over on top of the die and then cutting it that way. You're going to get a slight indentation on the back of the card, but if you're like me, if you're covering the inside of the card anyway, or if you put an insert in, it doesn't matter. It really won't show. I'm going to go with that. So before I do the next stage, I'm just going to do some stamping. So I'm going to take these, let's pop that out of the way. Let's go with I will always love you. I really love this sentiment. And I'm going to look for, I think, let's try bundled sage. Yeah, let's try bundled sage. What I'm doing is I want a colour that's going to be slightly darker than this. In fact, I can try it on here. Yeah, can you see? That's slightly dark. It's not dark at all, slightly darker. So take a stamping platform, a smaller one than this would be ideal, really. And let's start just stamping. I should have done this before I did anything else, before I stuck it on, but I didn't, so never mind. And I'm just going to stamp all over the background, kind of keeping it in line so I don't have any missed spots. And it's going to make the background look patterned with this fun sentiment, and it's all going to tie in, but it's subtle pattern. So we've just got the pattern paper there. Now I think I could actually also ink, let's use that again. Crafting, off the cuff, is that the word? So do any of you purchase magazine box kits? You know, like the John Next Door, like the Chloe's Cards ones, the Hunky Dory ones. Old and New did one once. We've not seen it again. I love that. Phil Martin, Sentimentally Yours. Sincerely Yours, for goodness sake. They're fabulous, aren't they? Look at that. You get so much in them, you really do. There's also Craft World ones. Craft World have done a couple of these box kits where you just get so much in them, and then all the inspiration you need. Now, the reason I've got my bobbins here is because I am going to be popping a thread in. Now, I'm thinking my thread wants to be as close a colour to the background as I can get it. So I think it might have to be, that's a bit bright. It might have to be this one, which isn't really a perfect match, but it's fine. So I'm going to try and find the end. Do you think maybe I should have found the end to this before we started? There it is, look. That wasn't too bad, was it? So with, where's that bit that cut out earlier? Here it is. So I'm just going to use this I would use it for something else usually. I'm just going to pop my heat gun on because a heat gun is much, much easier. So I'm going to snip some white paper into 2 bars. 1, 2, there. These bits are all going to have to go away, I'm afraid, in the bin. They can't use those much more now. Ignore that. And what I'm going to do is I am going to wrap the thread around one of those bars. Do you know what, you can use hot glue, but you can also use, if you don't have hot glue, you can use double-sided tape. I have some here that will work just equally as well. And pop that over, and that's going to secure that thread for you. There we go. Actually, let's leave the backing on for a moment. Let's not get ahead of myself. Now, if I lay that thread down, I'm going to put one of my owls underneath it and run that down the centre. And again, I want to have, oops, I'm picking it up, look. How has that even happened? The thread has gone through the tape. It's like magic. Let's try this again. Let's put that down there. Needs to come a little bit lower. There we go. Now bear in mind the distance between the top of your owl in the aperture and the top of the card. You don't want the card to come too far up. So I think there's about fine. Pull that nice and tight. I'm going to go quiet because I'm concentrating. Trying to get this as accurate as possible. There we go. I'm actually going to turn my glue gun off because I'd rather show you without a hot glue gun, because I know not everybody has one, not everybody likes to use them. And very often when I use a glue gun, I think people assume that you have to use a glue gun. You absolutely don't. And then, because I've got my double-sided tape there, I can put my second owl directly over the top. Can we give owl a name? Can we have some names in the comments, please? That would be fabulous, because I think, what is he called? He's just textured owl. He definitely needs a name. And then I'm going to come back in. Let's use walnut stain and just ink the edge of him. Now you can do a lot more with this owl. So as you've seen, the stenciling and the embossing and the die cutting, but you can also snip into him and you can layer elements up. Now I know I do that in some of my tutorials in the magazine. There's lots of other people have used it, have played with it as well, and done some beautiful things. There's a gorgeous card on the front of the magazine. Let's just bring this in. Look at the colourways on that. I love that. Isn't it wonderful? Okay, let's pop this on here. So what you want to do now is place your owl in the aperture. Scissors, here we go. I'm going to snip this quite long. There we go. So I've given myself a good sort of, I don't know, 8 centimetres? A complete guess. Let's take this other piece. It's got a piece of green glue to, there we go. It's ideal if it's the same colour as the inside of your card. Let's just pop that there. Now I'm going to wrap this around again, around this piece of card, just as I did the first time. Wrap it around a few times until you start getting close. Then we can start working out. Does it need to come round once more? I think so. There we go. Okay, happy with that. So I'm going to stick exactly the same, double-sided tape. I'm just going to stick this to secure the thread and then also onto the back of the card. So now I think we're ready to take the backing off of these tabs. Let's do this bottom one since I'm just here. Pull that nice and tight. Position the owl in the aperture. So you've got a nice even border all the way around, nice and tight and nice and central as well. And then do the same with the top one, and that should hold the owl in place, bobbing around inside the aperture. Just pop any loose threads onto the tape before you put that on there. So like I say, lifting that up, look, just pull that really tight. Obviously not so tight that you're putting too much tension on the thread. There we go. And then as I lift that up, look, there we go. How fun is he? He's a dizzy owl, isn't he? I love him. He's brilliant. So you can then, of course, add a sentiment onto there or inside if you want to, but I just think that's great. And obviously playing around with that, I have now popped down a lot of the pieces that I lifted up, but you can go back now and you can lift those pieces up and you can give him some dimension. So there's something you can be doing with the owl die that comes with Simply Cards and Papercraft. That is out now. It's in the shops. It's on CraftStash. You are getting this for just $8.99, including all the stamps, including the dies as well.